So you want to start out with your report card? This is sort of a franchise of yours, and then we'll come back to the economy?
Sure. I did sleep for 3 hours, but I dreamed about the debate, so technically I was still on the story. The top three people in my grades are A-minuses for the two young senators, Rubio and Cruz, both of whom now have a chance to reshape the race and become first-tier candidates, not just on the strength of the performance, because they showed what they've got last night. They showed what their strengths are. I also thought Governor Christie did quite well. The two current national frontrunners, Carson and Trump, then I have them next. I thought they did fine. The person who made the most news last night made the news by doing poorly. Jeb Bush did extraordinarily badly overall, talked the least, had a horrible face-off with Marco Rubio. And in the financial world now, the donors and bundlers, you're already seeing the Rubio high command reaching out to the Bush people saying, come on board with us. And that is going to be one of the critical things to watch in the next couple of days. Does Jeb Bush keep his finance team together? They're very, very panicky now about his performance.
So, sorry, Hen.
Sorry. The finance team, you're talking about fundraising. Let's talk about the economy and who laid out their plan. Last night was really supposed to be about the economy. But does it seem like we had that conversation and we have real takeaways?
Well, you may have had it as good as you can have it with 10 people on a stage, to be frank with you, all trying to interrupt each other. They've all laid out plans, but whether any of them actually explained their plans and had an opportunity to really engage with each other over the pros and cons of their plans, I think is questionable. And I think some people like Carson,
Bill has that right. I mean, if you actually just sort of look at areas, tax policy, regulation reform, Medicare reform, Social Security reform, healthcare reform, Jeb Bush has plan after plan after plan, probably the most detail of anyone. You don't get that out of that debate last night. That's the difference between on the stage.
Where is Jeb Bush's mojo? This is why Wall Street got behind him. They're saying, we like this guy's plan. We haven't heard it.
This is why policy wonks don't get elected president.
Yeah, but you've also got to remember, we are in October. People actually have to go and caucus and vote. And I think we love these events, and they're lots of fun to watch, and we can analyze the hell out of them. But the fact of the matter is, people at home, over time, will make a decision. And when they go to vote, I really believe, vote for president, they take this process very seriously.
So I agree with that. And one of the things that happened last night, it's been happening for a while now, is we saw the insider types, the Rubios, the Cruzes, the Rand Pauls, the Jeb Bushes, Kasichs, sort of take on the outsider types, Carson's, Trump, Fiorina's, and that separation's happening. And if you look at the policy specifics in the outsider type, I mean, there's not much there. So
yeah, I agree with Doug. I think the outsiders lost in the substantive way, whether
exactly.
it means anything in
the
polls.
And that's what I want to go back to Mark on, because there's just a certain amount of theater in all of this, and there was a lot of theater last night. But there is at least supposed to be some substance as well. If you did that kind of report card and come back to the basic question of economic policy, tax policy, I mean, for example, John Kasich talked about that a fair amount and has a track record in Ohio. How would your report card look different if you actually just graded on the substance of their economic statements last night?
Well, look, Secretary Daley's right. On 10 people on the stage with that format, you're not going to hear detailed policy plans. A lot of the candidates do have plans, but there is part of the job of presidency is not, can you explain your Social Security reform plan in a minute? Or can you inspire in people the sense that you've got a broad vision and you're making a priority trying to fix our entitlement system? So I think Governor Christie probably did the best on that score yesterday. And by the way, he has some of the most detailed plans, including on some tough issues like entitlement reform.
But in terms of performing, it feels as though Chris Christie has had his thunder stolen from Donald Trump in terms of being the straight-talking tough guy. That's really become Donald Trump's brand. So doesn't it turn Chris Christie into a secondary character here?
Well, to some extent, Donald Trump's turned everybody into a secondary character. But Governor Christie's bet is that in the end, people are going to want a fighter, a brash person, but also someone with a governing record. And I've said for a long time, although Governor Christie is not a perfect candidate, there's not a perfect candidate in the race, this is like a combination of roller derby and single elimination like death match. And if you look at the brawling skills required, it's part of politics. Chris Christie's as good as anybody in this race at scrapping and fighting. And if it ends up being Christie versus Trump, they're friends. But I think Governor Christie could hold his own in that fight, particularly in a party which, going back to President Reagan, has always nominated an establishment candidate. Chris Christie is an establishment candidate.
So, Bill Daley, Mark made a very important point about donors. We tend to think of these debates as being appealing to the public, to voters. But there's another constituency, which is people who are voting with their money. You've actually run a presidential campaign. You know how this works. What is the story behind Rubio going after Jeb Bush's money, as far as you
Well, obviously, they're from the same state. They know a lot of the same people. The Bush family has deep ties nationwide with funders. I think they'll stay with him a little longer than maybe Mark thinks, even though I do agree.
Stay with Bush.
We'll stay with Bush a little longer. But there's so much money out there, and it's so they can move so quickly that I think Rubio is going to take advantage of a very good performance and Cruz last night, even though they're, quote, establishment. They're only establishment because Trump and Carson and Fiorina are so non-establishment, okay? So anybody says Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio are establishment, it's a whole new definition going on here.